Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Media Madness. This is Stokely, and I'm here with.
Asia.
And Rosie.
And today we'll be discussing the role of media in shaping international narratives, specifically about West Asia and North Africa.
First off, today is December 9th, 2025, just in case, you're listening to this in the future. Happy early holidays for everyone listening to this or whatever, or whenever you're listening to this. So first off, we're going to start off with, a little backstory with Rosie's going to start off with some history. I'm going to go into some kind of numbers and stuff like that, what people are mostly getting their news from, and then Stokely's gonna go into some more alternative means of getting news.
Yeah, so I was really interested in looking at the role of our institutional medias, which are like our classic medias, CNN, Fox, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all that good stuff, about what they have contributed throughout history in the geopolitical events of West Asia and North Africa. Um, so, what I found is that they have played a really central role in how not only Americans interpret events, but also what the government chooses to do when they choose to enter countries and like when invasion is justified has been really important. The media has been really important in doing that because the media shapes our ontologies of what that region looks like, and the emphasis on crisis, on conflict, that makes us feel like there's an imminent threat, like places far away are a security threat to our own well-being, and it makes us feel justified in invasion, in intervention. And then at the same time, the culture feels really far away because media isn't covering like the day-to-day normal lives. It's not covering what we experience here in other places because that wouldn't make any money. Um,
Would you say that media exists as an arm of the state, like an affirmation arm of the state?
I think there's moments where it has existed as an arm of the state. Like if we look immediately after 9/11, media was a mouthpiece for Bush, like 100%. But then there was recognition of that, and there was critiques of the state in that period. But at the end of the day, media really exists as an institution that's trying to make a profit. So even when they are contesting the state's ideas, they're doing it not. I mean, there are individuals in the media who are really seeking to expose these stories, but on an institutional level, what chooses to get published, what chooses to get elevated, it's not what is important for people to hear, it's what is profitable, which results in these fear and hope narratives that emphasize difference and that emphasize conflict that ultimately leads to, real invasions of the US, putting, soldiers on the ground in other countries.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's a really good point, especially when it comes to, what happened with Palestine earlier this year, where we would see a bunch of media coverage, even with the huge, medias like Fox News, CNN, and then it kind of slowly died down. I think after that, I mostly just got the news from social media like Instagram, TikTok. That was where I was seeing all of it, like still going on, still people reporting on it, people still talking about it heavily, trying to get help. And I feel like it's comes down to a point where it's like, oh, these big medias are like, yeah, after a point, like, we don't want to report on it anymore because it's not profitable. And you're like, well, it's still going on. What are you talking about? there's still a lot going on. Even now, like, I think even on TikTok and Instagram, like, the reporting for a lot of these places has slowed down, and sometimes you have to go searching for them in order to, like, keep up with the news. Otherwise, you're not gonna hear anything else about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's really important for, like, certain things like that in certain places where things are going on. Like, even in Africa, there was it Sudan? I believe so. Even then, like, I still have to go and, like, type these things in to search up what's going on in order to, like, stay on top of it. Otherwise, I'm never gonna hear about it again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sad when things like that start to, like, dwindle off, and then people stop talking about it, or you, like, stop hearing about it. Like, even a few weeks ago, like, I still know that people are still, like, wanting to talk about Palestine and, like, really advocating for them. Like, even a few was it 2 weeks ago, I was out with family. We were just kind of walking on the street heading towards, I think, Lenox Mall, and we spotted people, like, still holding up, like, Palestine flags, still advocating for them. But it was only, like, a small group of people, and it was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, I wouldn't have known if, like, people were still doing this, like, if I wasn't out and about, or if I, like, didn't go searching for it.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you said, like people, the media coverage is slowing down. I feel like on social media, is it that people aren't talking about it anymore, or is it that algorithms aren't promoting it anymore? Is it like, I feel like the people are still telling their stories and still really engaged, but it's kind of almost the same thing that we see happening in institutional medias, where these algorithms are, you know, they have shareholders, and the owners of social media, they are interested in keeping, like, certain advertisers, or I don't know, like, the people who have money, they're interested in keeping them happy. So it's interesting, like, is it that people aren't interested anymore, or is it that, like, they don't want us talking about it and it's affecting their profits and their ability to get advertisers?
No, I definitely understand that. And I think when TikTok shut down for a little while and America was like, we can't use this anymore, they're getting all your data. And then after it came back up, there definitely was a shift in, I think, the way the algorithm worked. Like, it wasn't as noticeable at first, but I think nowadays it's definitely noticeable. You're starting to see things get definitely like blocked in a way.
Welcome back to Media Madness, everyone. We're going to continue with Asia, covering more about the TikTok situation.
Yeah, so I was saying that the algorithm has definitely changed after TikTok became unbanned, like when people were getting back on it. Definitely nowadays I start to see videos getting blocked or suppressed. I think even a few weeks ago I saw a video where a girl was talking about Epstein and she mentioned Syria, and then the video glitched, and it wasn't just like me, it was everybody on TikTok, and even when you download the video, it was messed up, so she didn't even get to finish her thought. And that's, you know, a suppression of, you know, your freedom of speech, and that's something to be worried about, especially in our country. Even, I think, a few months back in September, there was literally an article stating where Trump said, yeah, freedom of speech is not a thing anymore. And we should really be worried about that, especially when we're trying to get our news and such.
And just to add another example of this suppression, and really why we're not seeing a lot about Palestine on the ground news, the UN reported that more than 260 media professionals were killed in the recent hostilities in Gaza. So the on-the-ground news, video coverage that we've all depended on for like the past 2 or 3 years is actively being murdered by the Israel state or Israeli government and Zionist media. So it's not just that the algorithms are at work. That's definitely a cause for all of this, but it's also that the people who were delivering this vital news have been murdered along the course of this genocide. And Rosie, did you want to continue with more about like language in media?
Yeah, I can. I did this with a focus on the institutional medias, but I think we see it in the social media as well. And even in like oppositional medias, language is always a really powerful tool. And I think what I was looking at was the Ellen Sappington papers at Georgia State's archives, and they are rundowns from the 1980s from CNN. So they're like the scripts for CNN recordings. And one that I thought really captured the power of language was a premise to a special that the show was putting on. It says, "Some say he's a boy, but he's off to fight a war for Allah. In a CNN special series, follow Muhammad into training and see why religion and a place in heaven are more important to them than weapons on Day Watch at 9 a.m. Eastern." And I think, like, this seems like, oh, they're covering, like, the lives and, they're, like, showing, like, an in-depth story about a Muslim boy who was living in, I believe, Lebanon, but I'm not 100% sure. But when you look at the language, it's really distancing, and it's making him sound foreign, and it's making Islam sound like it has real fundamental differences to Christianity.
Oppositions, really.
Or yeah, like when Islam comes from Christianity, they have so much in common. They're really like very similar in a lot of ways in the grand scheme of things. But this is like an example of us versus them language that really makes the culture sound far, and then at the same time the threat is sounding close, and there's this constant battery of violence. When we're looking at the Sappington papers, it's a ton of coverage of the hostage crisis, and there's just like constant coverage of war and violence and conflict with these like spatterings of like culture stories or personal stories that really make it sound foreign and distant.
Now, this brings up a good question for me. Do you guys think that we could, as people, like, use certain language to combat, them trying to silence us in a way? Like, we use certain language to, like, get certain messages out that isn't as noticeable to them, but it would still help.
Like our own version of dog whistles in a way?
Yeah.
Definitely. I did want to say really quickly, because you said that Islam comes from Christianity, it's a little bit different from that. Not necessarily that it comes from it, but more so that they're all, along with Judaism, like Abrahamic religions, involved in some way with similar narratives and storylines. But as far as dog whistles, I honestly think in this era that just calling something what it is, like saying it's a genocide, saying this is violence, settler colonialism, really gives impact that we're not going to see from, like you guys have been saying, Fox News or CNN. It's going to be coming from people like us who are going to affirm what people are seeing on their phones, on their screens, even if it's less so now, that, what you're seeing is this. If you have a thought in your mind that it's violence, degradation, straight up just massacre and genocide, us being able to tell each other and affirm each other that that is what is going on is so important and so valuable. Rose, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think language is a really powerful tool, and like even you bringing up the language I just used and like clarifying that, it shows like how language, whether intentionally or unintentionally, really shapes the way that stories are perceived and understood. And so like us being careful about how we use our own language and, holding each other accountable like you just did, as well as also just being conscious of what other people's language is doing to us and how that's kind of changing how we understand it. I think is both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. Now, going to some numbers for like what people are using these days. About 57% of U.S. adults are using, digital devices like your phones and whatnot, iPads, going through social media. About 33% are like still using television to get their news. About 11-12% are using radio, and then about like 8 or 9% are still using print, like such as your newspaper, which I feel like I don't see newspapers as often.
Ever.
Yeah, I feel like it's very rare for me to see a newspaper article about anything. Everything's online now. You find all these articles on, websites, through links from social media and whatnot. Like, I feel like I never see anything, in print. And even radio shows, I feel like there's not a bunch of radio shows, and if there is, like, quote unquote a radio show, it's like on YouTube. It's kind of like this might
Like
be
podcast.
yeah, it's
Exactly.
definitely podcast like. So I feel like these like lesser forms of
Ooh, lesser, got him.
lesser forms of like getting your news are like definitely dwindling out, especially in the year of 2025. So everyone is like using their TVs, and TVs are like, everyone has a smart TV just about nowadays, so like that's connected to your internet. So I feel like those will definitely be gone within like the next few years.
Would you say that it's mostly older folks who are still holding on to TV, radio, newspapers?
I definitely think so. If I had to guess, like mostly my family that are like older, they are getting their news from like the TV. They will sit down, they'll turn on local news, and like they'll just be getting their news from that. And I'm like, you guys are kind of old. I mean, I get it. Like I'll sit there and watch it sometimes with them and like just get whatever news like they're getting. But I'm like, I can find all this on social media.
Probably quicker.
Yeah.
But
Probably
is it
better.
the same, like, do you think there's really been a change in who's producing? Because, like, all the people who used to make the newspapers, they're all over social media now. Like, I feel like I'm constantly seeing, like, New York Times, CNN, like, all of those. I'm constantly seeing them on my, like, Instagram feeds now. Like, do you think there's been, like, a real shift in, like, who's able to get their voices elevated?
I think in a way it has definitely changed, but I feel like there are definitely some creators that are like able to like still educate people like without having the influence of like these big companies. Like within our like little zines we made for class, I mentioned on the back some people that I love watching on TikTok, like Hank Green, Nikita Dump Trunk, and It's Dean. And I think specifically It's Dean because for a long time he was a Republican and he was like supporting Trump until he educated himself very thoroughly. He's a very smart man. I think he's only like 21, 22-ish, so he's still young, but he is a very educated young man. And he will be on live, I think, just about every day, like going against people that are still in support of Trump, being like, why do you still support him? And then just spitting out facts after facts after facts. And I think that is very commendable, and you don't see that very often. And I think that's important because he is running his own account, and he doesn't have the influence of these bigger people to, like, silence his voice. And he's just like, I'm going to say whatever the hell I want to say because it's my account, and it's important that people get the information that they need.
And to tie it to the Smith reading, Sarah Smith defines political geography as the study of how power struggles both shape and are shaped by the places in which they occur, specifically the spatial nature of political power. And I really do think our investigation into media is one of those forces of political power and how it's shaped and how it's shaping us and shaping our conclusions about the world. So I definitely think, this is an important topic both to the narratives that we're trying to shape as a community. It's really a generation of young people entering into a very chaotic time in human history. And so I think it's a really exciting and important focal point for us to move towards next is how we're shaping narratives and how the narratives we're receiving are impacting our very lives. So I wanted to ask, how in the past 2 or 3 years, has international conflict impacted your day-to-day lives and how you've moved and how you've made decisions, whether it be socially, politically, or economically?
Oh my God, what a great question. I definitely think for me, because I love learning about other places so much, like I love learning about the different cultures of other places, like what brings them, what influences them. And I think after like seeing so much going on in the world, I'm like, oh my God, like I am just been like in this like kind of bubble, I think, for most of my life. And I think nowadays I'm like trying to coin myself, like educating other people around me. Like with my mom, I'm like, oh my God, have you heard about what's going on, over here in Palestine? You need to get on it. It's a genocide. People are being killed, like this, that, and the third. I love to educate people that are not as into the news as I am. Because I'm like, it's important because people will spread, what they hear. And I just want to make sure that the people that I'm close with are aligned with my views in a
That's so
way, and
important.
I want them to know, like, hey, this is going on. We need to be worried about it. Like, I want you to understand that your rights are being taken away. The world is a lot different than what you think about, and it's not just focused around the U.S.
Rosie?
Yeah, I think the past couple years has been like a really like I feel like there's been a real shift in the way that I want to say young people especially, but probably everybody really perceives like geopolitics and because there has been like so much violence and it's so accessible with social media, like where you can see it in a way that we've never seen it before in history. I feel like there has been like a real like shift in exposure, and in some ways I've really been able to continue living my life in the same way, which is really telling that like I still have like all of the same access and I can still make all of these like choices of where I want to shop and what I want to do. And I think with knowing and having such visceral content of what has been going on, I think it's like taught me to really appreciate the privilege of having such a plethora of choices of where I want to shop and where I want to spend my time and my money. And I think it's really taught me to be a little more considerate of where I'm shopping, what I'm doing, and like what effect that has on a larger scale.
Fully agreed. Positionality is so important, especially for us as like Americans and even just locally as students living in Atlanta, with the way GSU's relationship to the people living in Atlanta is historically and currently very contentious. So I definitely agree. I think the past few years has invited me to actually investigate deeper the things that I'm hearing online, and I think even most of us, especially with the introduction of AI and maybe bot narratives, have been pushed to investigate more thoroughly kind of everything that we're hearing and to not take things at face value but to go deeper. And examples of how we can go deeper, I'm going to lean into some of the subversive media outlets that we've looked into over the course of this project. One in particular, Mint Press News, is very valuable specifically for the ongoing crisis in West Asia and North Africa, specifically the genocide in Palestine, the genocide in Sudan, and then lower down in Africa, what's going on in Congo, which is also a genocidal operation. And in many ways, Israel is also involved there, as well as other Western powers, the US included. Mint Press News is so valuable for not just getting the facts about the case, but also a narrative that humanizes people in a way that, as Rosie mentioned, historically has not been happening for colonized people and their struggles. So I think that's very important. Another example is Breakthrough News. And all of these are available on all these outlets. Really have many platforms that they're available on, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, or just regular news websites. Breakthrough news is really important for both domestic and international coverage, whether that be what is Trump doing today or how is the resistance in Palestine moving today. And it's very current and very impactful and meaningful. Another example would be Venezuela Analysis. The ongoing aggression against Venezuela by the Trump administration is ever present. We don't know what day that aggression might reach a fever pitch, and we have to, I think, especially as Americans, be aware of what's going on in the Caribbean, because it is, as usual, our government supporting and really maintaining and pushing for violence and aggression. So Venezuela Analysis is based in Venezuela, is centered around the lives, experience, and interests of Venezuelan people. So it's another very valuable resource.
How did you discover these outlets?
Honestly, social media. I like to follow a lot of particular people who have, outspoken, loud, often left progressive politics. And more often than not, they're sharing resources of how did I get here? Because I think it's one thing to know better, it's another thing to make sure that others can also, kind of follow in that path or do their own research or have access to more resources that are not just traditional media. And so social media, and I hate to say it, but especially Twitter, it is by and large terrible. But y'all, I promise you, where there's like 100 terrible tweets, I just block them. There's like at least 20, this is a really great perspective, this is another news outlet, whether it be Mint Press, Venezuela Analysis, Breakthrough News, other sources like Red Clarion, Red Sales. They're just, sometimes you have to go through the mud to find, the good stuff. And the good stuff is definitely available, but it does require, of course, like more effort to find it.
And then this is for you too, Asia. I feel like you kind of started to touch on it, but what are the tools to differentiate like the mud from the good sources when you're on these platforms that do have so much like AI slop or people who have ill intention? Like, how do you know when you hit something good?
We even had this question when we were doing our presentation, and kind of you just have to go about and do your own research. Like, I know it's a hassle. You're like, oh, I don't want to go through the trouble of making sure these people are, who they say they are, or they have these good intentions. But you kind of have to. Like, you have no choice, because you could, like, on social media especially, like, you don't know who these people are. They're behind a screen, and they could be doing this with, like, ill intentions, and you just never know. But you have to do your own research. You have to go dig deep into these pages, into, like, all these social media platforms, and make sure that what you're seeing is what you want to see, and that it is with your, what's the word I'm looking for?
Ideology.
Yeah, with your ideology in mind. So just be careful about what you're seeing online. Simply.
Definitely fully agree. As much as it is a hassle, it's just important, because we live in a day and age where not being informed is similarly as dangerous as being misinformed.
Exactly.
So just like Asia was saying, you just have to fact check everything. We can't pretend like older generations, not to do any ageism up in here, but seeing something on Facebook and then taking it at face value, we actually have to be more careful about that, because if we begin to do that, then all of the nonsense we were talking about them, we're just going to reproduce. So
sure.
It's checking, double checking, triple checking, having conversations with people, especially conversations with people, because if you do exist in a bubble, which many of us do, I kind of love my bubble sometimes, but you have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you are in conversation with folks and they throw out something that is wildly different than what you've perceived, I mean, it's kind of an invitation to really go deeper into that investigation that's not just solo, but a more collective communal effort as well.
I think that is such a good point, like going beyond media in your like creation of your personal perspectives and your knowledge. Like, you do need some real lifeness. You gotta get out, like
touch grass.
Like, no matter how much of an informed and conscientious media consumer you are, you do need to hear some other people and a little bit of pushback to your ideas.
Yeah.
That was a really good point.
Get out there, as Stokely said, touch some grass. It is important. I mean, I think especially after COVID, a lot of us are like very comfortable with staying in our own spaces. But please, please, please get out there, you know, try to find some different sources of news, you know, talk to some people, make sure you get out there, you know, get some different perspectives. That's all I gotta say about that.
And whenever possible. And you know, there's also online options, but the conversation is really the core of it. We need to be in conversation with other people. We need to be in conversation with our communities as well. It can't just be coming to conclusions by ourselves, because what value does that have to actually changing the world or trying to understand better the world? We need other people. We need each other. Welcome back, everyone, to Media Madness. I think to end off, we're going to be discussing zine technologies, and then our call to action that we have for every one of our listeners, as well as ourselves. So to start with zine technologies, I do have a quote from Zines in the Zeitgeist, Reclaiming Creativity in a Digital World by Brian Matthews. He says that in an era where digital platforms dominate, zines offer something rare and tactile. A slower, more intentional medium that resists algorithms and monetizations. This DIY culture aligns with broader emerging cultural trends. A push for authenticity in the face of corporate influence, a longing for personal connection amidst digital saturation, and a celebration of craft and uniqueness. As these trends continue to grow, zines serve as a hopeful counterpoint to an increasingly commercialized and curated digital landscape. So for us, zines become a more accessible, creative, cost-effective, and ultimately grassroots form of media information sharing. Understanding the value of digital geographies is real, and exploring that, especially with others in community, is so valuable. But also taking the impetus and kind of the creative guide and signal to create with our people, with our communities, in the form of zines, and that way of sharing information also has a real value that should not be ignored, and especially in the context of private control of much of the internet, much of social media platforms, should be explored more and more as we move towards better understandings, more conscious understandings, and more vast and diverse perspectives on reality and on this ever-changing landscape. And now I'll pass it on to Asia to conclude with our call to action.
1 second. Let me pull it back up.
While you're doing that, I thought that quote was really beautiful, and I think zines are like such a great way for community building and to have like a material expression of, you know, your thoughts and your work. Do you think that they are like a scalable form of media, or do you think they need to be scalable? Like, do you think they're limited in their like physical nature, or I don't know?
I do think they need to be scalable. Ultimately, at least the outlook of production needs to be. And honestly, though, when it comes to scalability, I think starting small and aiming towards getting bigger is so important. And in the context of organization, like movement struggle, in the Stop Cop City movement, online especially, it had a wider reach than it actually did in reality, like in day-to-day lives. One of the events that was like a really national event, it was calling a bunch of people to come to Atlanta and struggle against the construction site. We had a comrade from Philadelphia mention that her Uber driver, another black person, she asked him about what his thoughts on Stop Cop City, and he was like, "What is that?" And this is an Atlanta native. He lives and works in the city, and he had no idea what Cop City was at all. So in a real way, there's been a lack, I think of person-to-person communal engagement. And zines are a form of overcoming that, I think. So it's not to say that we should only do one way, but it is to say and argue that the importance of local communications and local community building aren't going to go away. So I think we do need to refocus and believe in the small things, the things that right now are not as grand or as scaled, are still super valuable for our ultimate goal, which is more communication, more agreement, and just ultimately more understanding of the world and our communities.
That's such a great point. Like, online you can reach so many people so easily, but to what end? Like, what's the real value of that connection if it doesn't materialize in something more than just them happening to see your post? And like, a zine is one way to have like a deeper and hopefully more long-lasting and materially it moves geographies into the real world.
Yeah, great points. So for our call of action, take attention away from mainstream media, like your televisions, your Fox News, your CNN, and give more attention to grassroots sources like your zines, your subversive news outlets, and everyday information sharing through social media, as well as in person. Remember that. Not just through social media is important, but in person, like giving out things is also very important. Push for a more conscious awareness about how the media we consume disregards or regards and frames international situations, as well as push a better understanding of the forces at work behind every source of information. So make sure that you're doing your own research. Don't take everything you see at face value, and make sure that it aligns with your ideology.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah.
This has been Media Madness
With
Rosie
Asia.
And Stokely. Have a great break.
Bye.